Hey, deep divers. Ready for a big one
I
today?
am always ready to dive in.
Today, we are tackling the Bible.
We are going deep on this one. This is exciting.
I know a lot of you are probably interested in this one for all sorts of reasons. Maybe you want to sound smart. Maybe it's for a book club. Maybe you were just curious.
Always good to be curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big book, thousands of years old, lots of history there, and a lot of people find it pretty influential. So let's dive in. But, even if we spent the rest of our lives talking about it, it probably wouldn't even scratch the surface.
You are telling me.
So what we're going to try to do today is give you a few nuggets of knowledge, some things that'll help you kind of wrap your head around this massive, influential text.
I like it. Nuggets of knowledge.
So to get started, one of the first things you need to know is how this book is structured.
Okay, yeah, good point.
So basically, it's divided into two main parts, like two big chapters in a long, long book. You've got the Old Testament,
Right.
which kind of sets the stage, and then you've got the New Testament.
Which changes the game.
Totally. They give it like two parts of a really, really long movie saga.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Now, the Old Testament, it's like a whole library in itself.
Mm.
You've got the Torah, those first 5 books, which are super important in Judaism. That's kind of like the origin story, right?
Absolutely.
And famously, that's where you find those 10 Commandments.
Everybody's heard of those.
Exactly. But it's not all laws and rules. You also find incredible poetry, like Psalms. It's amazing how those ancient verses still resonate with us today, dealing with very human emotions,
Mm.
joy, sorrow, even anger.
Yeah, it's timeless. And weaving through all these different genres, there's this idea of a covenant that's super important to the Old Testament.
Hmm.
It's this idea of this binding promise, this agreement between God and the Israelites.
It's like a two-way street, not just a one-sided deal. And that was pretty radical for its time.
Totally. And that's what scholars call covenant theology. It completely changed how people saw their relationship with God, not just some distant, all-powerful being, but someone who's actively involved, making promises, setting expectations.
It's like establishing this whole new framework for understanding their place in the world and their connection to the divine.
Yeah, it's huge.
And those 10 Commandments, they take on a whole new meaning when you see them as part of this bigger covenant, right?
Exactly. They're not just random rules. It's part of this binding agreement.
Right. Obligations on both sides. Now, buckle up, because when we jump to the New Testament,
Things get really interesting.
they do. And the arrival of Jesus, well, that changes everything.
Yeah, for Christians, Jesus isn't just a new character showing up in the story.
Yeah.
He's seen as fulfilling prophecies that were woven throughout those Old Testament texts.
Wow. So it's all connected.
It's all connected. And with Jesus, we see this idea of a new covenant emerging. And it's a covenant that's open to everyone, not just a select group.
So it's like the scope of the story just expands outwards, becoming even more universal.
Exactly.
And this is where those themes of grace and forgiveness really take center stage, right?
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to see how those ideas get explored, especially in the epistles. Those are letters written by those early church leaders, figuring out how to actually live out this radical new way of life.
So we've got these two testaments, right? Two parts of this huge, complex book. And they each have their own unique characters and themes and timelines. But how does it all tie together?
Right. Well, if you zoom out and look at the big picture, the Bible, at its core, is a story. And it's a story about the relationship between humanity and God. It's not just some rule book. It's this dynamic narrative. And it unfolds over thousands of years.
It's like a really, really long TV show.
Right. Or one of those epic fantasy series where all the different characters and storylines eventually converge. And, even for folks who don't come at it from a religious perspective, it's still studied and debated by historians, literary scholars.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
For its historical and literary significance, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we've done it again, another deep dive.
We did.
And as always, deep divers, we like to leave you with something to think about.
Sure.
So if different parts of the Bible reflect these different expressions of faith, what does that tell us about how belief itself has evolved or maybe even stayed the same over centuries?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is, and I hope you do.